Southampton take on Manchester United, and Kweku has just dropped a bombshell off camera. I'm in disbelief. Kind of agree though. Kweku, please tell us what you just said.
See, over the last couple of weeks, I've had Man United fans getting onto me, and you set me up for them to get onto me yet again. I think Bruno Fernandes, with the ability, in terms of the pure ability with the ball at his feet, I think he's one of the best players in the Premier League. But I don't think in the modern Premier League that a team can win a league title with Bruno Fernandes being your best player. I just don't think it's possible. I think some of the decisions that he makes in crucial situations means that Manchester United are a worse team for it. He's still their best player overall. I think mainly will probably take that title in a season or two. But I think Bruno Fernandes gives you so much in terms of output, or used to give you so much in terms of output. If you look at his numbers over the last season and a half, it's not as prolific as it was when his first couple of seasons at United. I just think some of his decision makings in such a crucial area of the pitch means that Manchester United are limited in what they can do, and they can't control games as well as teams like Liverpool or Man City. That's not like denigrating Bruno Fernandes. He's such a good player and he's done so much for Manchester United over the last 3, 4, 5 seasons. But in terms of trying to challenge for the top honours, which they should be doing, rather than glorifying winning an FA Cup and League Cup like Ten Hag's been doing over the last couple of weeks, Bruno Fernandes cannot be your star man.
I think Bruno is a symptom of the problem, not the problem itself. I think it must be very frustrating for him, with all the ability he has, playing alongside these players who on the large part will be paid more than him. They're brought in, he gets excited about them, they were fantastic at other clubs, and then they come in and they just can't perform to his level or the level that they were playing at before. I think he is right to be very frustrated, and I know what you mean. There's a lot of like Hollywood passes, there's a lot of like pop shots from the edge of the area. That's a symptom of being the best player in a team. Yeah. We saw Jack Grealish do that at Aston Villa. Now he doesn't do that because he's in a system that works for him, and that's what's happening with Bruno. I think it's unfair to say that you can't win something with him in the team. If you replace Kevin De Bruyne with Bruno Fernandes this season, City probably still go on to win the league.
Yeah, I don't know about that, bro. I think that's actually a crazier shout than what Kweku just said, because I also think Bruno Fernandes' technical ability is probably unrivaled in the league. In terms of if he's got the ball and it's bouncing, he can hit a half volley pass cleaner than anyone else. Do anything with the ball. Like, yeah, his technique is unbelievable. But I think when you switch things like temperament, like De Bruyne's temperament in a game is so nailed on. De Bruyne's not trying to play a 56-yard pass on the halfway line at 0-0, 84th minute. He knows in the Premier League, I think that's the key thing. In the Premier League, there's a time and a place to do certain things.
But he didn't know that at Chelsea when he was managed poorly by Mourinho.
Yeah, but
he knows it now. He knows it now
so many years on. Though.
Yeah, but he knows it now when he's managed by the best manager in the world. I think Bruno, just like all the other Man United players, are just terribly mismanaged.
What I'll give him credit for is the fact that there's been Manchester United players that have come and gone over the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. He's the only one that's come and actually been a success. Wholeheartedly, in terms of coming in and delivering and over-delivering in terms of what people's expectations were for you as a player. I just think that when you look at him, he'd probably benefit from a tempo setter in that team. And when you look at this Manchester United team, they haven't got a tempo setter. Mainu's great, and he's great at covering, not necessarily great at covering ground, but he's a great box-to-box midfielder who's technically very, very sound. But he's not a tempo setter. Neither's Casemiro. So Bruno's being asked to do a lot of things that are not within his wheelhouse. I don't know why I was watching it, the full game replay of Manchester United versus Spurs in the League Cup final 2009. It was a game that 0-0 went to...
You have way too much time on your hands, bro.
Game 0-0 went to penalties, but I was watching Paul Scholes very carefully because there's a referendum about Paul Scholes. Was like, is he actually, or was he actually that good? He was a tempo setter, and it allowed Manchester United players like Cristiano Ronaldo, who lost the ball maybe about 15, 16 times that game, but he could try things because he knew he had that tempo setter to dictate the pace of the game. Manchester United haven't got that. So when Bruno Fernandes does try those things, it looks 10 times worse because they haven't got anybody to reel him back in when things aren't going well. And so I think you are right in terms of the symptom or him not being the cause of the problem at Manchester United. But it's a fact. He plays the way he plays, and Manchester United are not great as a result of him not being the kind of player that they need to control games.
I think you take him out of the team, and what you're left with, they perform much worse, and they finish much lower in the league. Yeah. They're a very, very average team with a very average manager, and they've got individual bits of brilliance which allow them to win the FA Cup. And a lot of those moments, more often than not over the last few years, have come from Bruno.
That's where I think this situation for them becomes really interesting, because they go to Southampton, and honestly, with no disrespect to Southampton, there's a lot of players on this side that are struggling to handle it. Currently in the Premier League, may change. Also a new manager, as in new manager in the Premier League, who's also learning the ropes as well. And United, sounds crazy to say this, but they have to win this game. If they hand Southampton this win, it speaks to what you're saying about Ten Hag. We've spoken about this many, many times. Like, how much longer does Ten Hag stay in the job? Because Southampton so far this season have been very drab. They can't score goals. They struggle in the final third. They struggle to keep clean sheets.
They're terrible defensively. They've conceded the most goals in terms of errors leading to goals in the Premier League, 4, only ahead of Manchester United, who conceded 3 as a result of it. So 2 defences that have been struggling this season. There needs to be a conversation, though, about progressive managers, and we talked about it a little bit off air, in terms of, is it self-serving or is it football principle? Because you look at a manager like Russell Martin, who's played his football when he was at Swansea, carried this to Southampton, played very progressive football in the Championship. But then you look at a manager like Vincent Kompany, who played progressive football to the point where Burnley got relegated, refuses to change the style of football, but he ends up getting the Bayern Munich job. Look at Enzo Maresca in the Championship playing progressive football, but when it went downhill in the mid part of the season, Leicester fans were crying out for him to change his style of football, but he didn't. Leicester managed to get promoted, but Leicester fans weren't crying when he left. He got the Chelsea job. And so I think we're in an era of football right now where managers are not self-serving, but they're going to stick to their football principles because they know that can maybe get them a job further down the line. I don't think, despite the fact that Southampton have been so poor defensively and playing out the back, he's not going to change for anybody because he knows that maybe 2 or 3 years' time, he's going to maybe get a job that serves him a lot more than serving Southampton in terms of staying in the Premier League.
And this is exactly what we were speaking about off air, and like obviously there's been that trend going around about Barclaysmen, and there's a whole nostalgia for like the Barclays era of the Premier League where they were like exciting, flashier footballers. I get really, really frustrated, and it's only been 3 games, and I don't want to be too harsh on Russell Martin. I get really frustrated with managers like him and Vincent Kompany. It doesn't work for your quality of player. There's no disrespect in it at all. You are trying to follow the guidelines and the principles of Johan Cruyff, who had one of the best teams in the world, of Pep Guardiola, who has one of the best teams of the world, and you don't have the players for that. And you're, as you say, it's very self-serving. You're forgetting the fact that there are people here in that crowd, in the 30,000, who earn minimum wage, spend half of their money following your team up and down the country, and you're refusing to be pragmatic. You're refusing to give them any joy because you're self-serving in a way that you want, like, your portfolio to reflect something that it isn't. And the players that they have, you can't be passing it out from the back. It doesn't seem to make any sense.
But is it not incumbent on the board or the hierarchy at a football club to then make that change? Because he changed his style of football. They might still lose games and he might not get a job again. I look at a manager like Gary O'Neill. He does play relatively progressive football, but he lost his job at Bournemouth for a manager in Iraola who plays even more progressive football. And so I feel like football's going in a certain direction. The only manager in the Premier League right now who doesn't play progressive football is Sean Dyche, and he's still losing games. And so I think these managers are sticking to their principles because they know they're probably going to get sacked anyway. And if they do get the sack, at least they can go upwards as opposed to dropping down again.
But there's a difference with Sean Dyche and Russell Martin. You can be as progressive as you want and you can play nice football and that can be your build-up play. But at some point, you have to realise that it's just self-sabotage. We saw it with Burnley last year. They would actually dominate games and they'd end up losing 4-0 because the keeper would just pass it to the striker every time. It's not a sensible way to play football. You can still stick to your principles and have some pragmatism, but it seems like pragmatic football is just not in anymore.
But in a weird way, like we're talking about Southampton having principles. United don't have principles.
Yes,
and we've debated about this so many times over. So in a lot of ways, like both of what you're saying is correct. Like having principles can potentially work. Not having principles can also potentially flop. Like there's literally no way to win because United will go into this game, and I've got the stats in front of me here. They've conceded 4.3 XG this season, which is more than Leicester, Wolves and Fulham. They're averaging 11 shots per game. It's the 4th worst in the league. This is a team without principle that are potentially trying to do a little bit of everything to try and become successful. Ain't working for them either.
Well, I'll push back a little bit. I think Ten Hag is trying to instill principles, but he's changed his principles, and that's why I lost a little bit of respect for him. In his first season, it was firefighting. The game against Brentford, game against Brighton, showed him that he couldn't play the style of football that he wanted to play. They still got the results. They finished 3rd and won the trophy, but it was very much counter-attacking. We sit deep and we hit in the counter-attack, and Marcus Rashford is going to put away most of his chances. In his second season, last year, no style of play. I didn't see it, and it was terrible, but they still managed to win a trophy. But now he's talking about being the best transition team in the world. He's talking about counter-pressing and winning the ball higher up in the pitch, but we're not seeing it. And so I feel like he would have been better. The Ajax Erik Ten Hag that we saw, who was dominating possession and was still fairly counter-pressing in his approach, but it was more about retaining possession and dominating the possession. I think I would respect him more, and I think he'd probably be in a better place in terms of the perception of him if he stuck to his principles. The fact that he's flip-flopped through 3 or 4 different philosophies doesn't stand in a great stead. We knew what Jurgen Klopp wanted to do when he came to the Premier League, and he didn't move off that. We know what Pep Guardiola wants to do. Ten Hag's not been that.
So who annoys you more? Vincent Kompany's sticking to his principles. Ten Hag being flexible with them.
God, that's a difficult question. No, the sticking to the principles when you don't have the players, I think, is what has contributed to a lot of us maybe losing a bit of love of watching certain Premier League games. Yeah. I know, like, we get kind of gaslit sometimes into saying, "Oh, it's just nostalgia," but there were certain games that just were more fun to watch, and I think everyone is trying to be the same thing now, and I don't think that it's working for the lesser teams, and I don't think that they should stick with it. With Ten Hag, completely agree with what you say. He had a principle. He bought players to fit into that principle and then changed his principle with players who fit the old principle. It's a completely ridiculous way of running a football club, and now he's just kind of throwing more cash at it. I don't think he still has figured out exactly how he wants to play. I don't think when you look at that 11 or when you look at the squad, they're players who you would necessarily put together if you were building a team that actually works around each other. So, both annoying.
Can I ask you a question real quick before we wrap it up? If Ten Hag loses this game, what happens? Does he get sacked?
No, we were just chatting about this before. I think they'll keep going because you can't, like, there's a few things to this. They tried to find a manager, didn't work. I think Gary Neville and Carragher are having an argument over this, but it was very clear that they tried to find someone to replace Ten Hag. They couldn't find someone to replace Ten Hag, so they kept Ten Hag. And now they're in a situation, they're given him a new contract, they've spent loads of money, and I think that's the cycle that United can't afford to get into, is get another manager in halfway through the season who goes, Mazraoui's not my guy, De Ligt's not my guy, Rashford's not my guy, Xerxes not my guy, and now you're back in the cycle again. But the other counterside to that is, if they're 14th in the league, he's gone, because they can't be that low either.
If they play like they have done the last 3 games, he's gone by Christmas. They'll probably have an interim manager until the end of the season, and the merry-go-round will just continue after next season.
I do think that when you look at teams that have been successful in terms of changing manager, big teams, if they are going to make the change, Christmas is probably the right time. That's when Liverpool made the change, when they got rid of Brendan Rodgers, brought in Jurgen Klopp, wrote off that season and said, find out what you like, what you don't like, and we'll go again the following year. Arsenal did the same with Arteta, sacked Emery around Christmas time, and that gave them that season like as a free hit. They won the FA Cup, but they finished 8th, and then he had the next season to go again. So if they are to get rid of Ten Hag, I think around Christmas time is probably the right time to do it.
All right, who's winning this? Is it Mr. Principal or Mr. Flexi Time Principal?
Oh my God, tough one to call.
Kim's not watching this. He's not watching.
I'm not watching. I'll just be filled with rage the whole time. I think United probably will have too much quality in the end for Southampton. I think we spoke about this when we were discussing Ipswich at the beginning of this season. I think you need a really strong forward line and a really strong couple of centre-backs to stay in the Premier League when you've just come back. I don't really see that in Southampton. I can't imagine them staying in the league, and I can't imagine them beating a lot of the teams, particularly like teams with a lot of quality. I don't expect United to put on a masterful team performance, but I think a few individual moments of brilliance from their good players will be enough. I reckon about 2-0 to United.
I will go next. I remember the game at St Mary's where United won 1-0 and Bruno Fernandes scored. I'm pretty sure on that day United were absolutely awful and Bruno scored a goal that was just a piece of magic. I think it'll be a repeat of that. I think United will win 2-0 as well, or maybe 1-0. I don't see Southampton scoring at all, which is crazy to say because United cannot defend.
United can't defend. That's why I think they will concede, but I think they'll just have a little bit too much Southampton. It won't be pretty, but they'll get the result, and I think they win 2-1.